rising above life's challenges. God's teachings for those in difficult times. Greetings, my friends. Today, we embark on a special journey, not only through the remarkable stories of the Bible, but also through life-changing lessons that will help you rediscover faith, motivation, and hope in your life. Life isn't always easy, and sometimes we face challenges that seem impossible to overcome. But in our darkest moments, God is always by our side. Today, I want to share with you a powerful story about Samuel, a man of ordinary beginnings but extraordinary faith. Through his unwavering trust in God, he became a figure of great influence and spiritual leadership. Have you ever felt lost, disappointed, or unsure of what to do during life's difficult moments? Remember, God always has the best plan for you, even when you can't see it yet. Let's dive into Samuel's story and discover the profound lessons it offers for our lives today. The story of Samuel, absolute faithfulness and obedience. The story of Samuel is a profound testimony of faithfulness and obedience to God, beginning with his mother, Hannah. She was not merely a woman longing for a child, but also a model of unwavering faith. Before Samuel was born, Hannah endured years of ridicule and shame because she was unable to have children. This was not only a physical pain, but also a deep emotional burden, especially in a society where bearing children was seen as both a blessing and a sacred duty for women. Rather than turning her frustrations into anger against God, Hannah did something extraordinary. She turned to him in tears and prayer. What is striking about her prayer is that she didn't just plead for a child for her own sake, but vowed to dedicate that child wholly to the Lord's service. This act demonstrated not only her faith in God's power to make the impossible possible, but also her willingness to surrender everything to him. Her prayer reminds us of a profound truth. In our moments of weakness, we can find strength by trusting in God completely. When God answered her prayer and Samuel was born, Hannah kept her promise. She didn't hold on to the child for herself, but brought him to the temple to serve under Eli the priest. For any mother, parting with her young child must have been an incredibly painful decision. Yet, Hannah's actions reflect a heart wholly committed to God, a heart willing to sacrifice personal desires to fulfill a divine promise. Samuel grew up in the temple, surrounded by challenges and a morally compromised environment. Eli's sons, who served as priests, were corrupt and abusive of their sacred roles. However, Samuel remained steadfast in his faith and commitment to God. The pinnacle of his obedience came when God called him during the night. Although Samuel initially did not recognize the voice of God, under Eli's guidance, he responded with humility and readiness. "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." This simple yet profound response marked the beginning of Samuel's journey as one of Israel's greatest prophets. What stands out in Samuel's story is how an ordinary child became an extraordinary instrument for God's purposes. It reminds us that we don't need to be extraordinary in the world's eyes to be used by God. Instead, we only need to possess a heart willing to listen and obey. Through Samuel, we see that God values faithfulness and humility above all else. If you ever feel small or inadequate in life, remember that God does not seek perfection. He seeks hearts that are willing to obey and trust him. Samuel's story is a powerful reminder that when we say, "Here I am, Lord," God can work through us to achieve great things. In life, sometimes the most important step is simply to answer God's call and allow him to guide our paths. The patience of Hannah, a journey of longing and hope. Hannah's journey is not only a story of waiting, but also a profound testament to steadfast faith and patience in the face of adversity. As we reflect on her life, it becomes clear that she bore not just personal sorrow but also societal pressure. In her time, a woman's inability to have children was often seen as a failure, bringing judgment and scorn from others. Yet, instead of letting these criticisms break her spirit, Hannah chose to bring her pain to God. Her story reminds us that true faith is not only evident during moments of joy and success, but also in the midst of hardship and waiting. When Hannah was mocked and humiliated by others, she did not retaliate or turn away from God. Instead, she prayed earnestly, a prayer filled with raw emotion, vulnerability, and trust. What stands out is that Hannah's prayer was not a mere request but an act of surrender. She poured out her heart to God, showing us that prayer does not need to be perfect or eloquent. It only needs to be genuine. When God eventually answered Hannah's prayer, we see his faithfulness and perfect timing at work. Hannah had to endure years of waiting, but her patience was rewarded with the birth of Samuel, who became one of Israel's greatest leaders. This teaches us a vital truth. God's delays are not his denials. Sometimes he allows us to wait because he is preparing something far greater than we could imagine. Hannah's story is also a lesson in gratitude and integrity. After receiving her long-awaited blessing, she did not hold on to Samuel as her own possession but kept her vow to God. She brought him to the temple, dedicating him fully to the Lord's service. This act of surrender reflects a deep understanding that every blessing we receive ultimately belongs to God. It challenges us to ask ourselves, are we willing to give back to God what is most precious to us, trusting him with our deepest treasures? In addition to patience, Hannah's story teaches us to embrace gratitude. Her decision to fulfill her vow was not an obligation but an act of joy and worship. It reminds us that all we have comes from God, and our lives should be lived in gratitude and service to him. If you find yourself in a season of waiting, take heart in Hannah's example. God knows your struggles, your tears, and your desires, but he also knows the perfect time and way to answer your prayers. Like Hannah, do not lose hope or grow weary in your faith. Instead, continue to pray, trust, and believe that God's timing is always perfect. The waiting is never wasted, and the blessings he gives will far exceed what you could ever hope for. Through Hannah, we are reminded that patience is not passive. It is an active trust in God's promises, a faith that perseveres even when the answers seem delayed. Let her story inspire you to keep believing and to trust that God is working all things together for your good, even in the silence and waiting. From Samuel to David, the journey through trials. David, a central figure in the Bible, exemplifies how God chooses those whom society might overlook. When the prophet Samuel came to Jesse's house to anoint the future king, no one thought that the youngest son, David, who was tending sheep in the field, would be God's chosen one. Yet, God declared to Samuel, "The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." 1 Samuel 16 verse 7. This story reminds us that God does not require perfection, status, or power. He seeks hearts that are sincere, faithful, and ready to serve. This is a profound lesson for today's world, where we often feel pressured to meet impossible societal standards. Many feel judged by their appearances, achievements, or what they can do. But God sees differently. He looks at the soul, at the intentions that lie within. Consider the trials David faced after being anointed. Although chosen as king, he did not immediately ascend the throne. David endured years of being pursued by Saul, the reigning king who felt threatened by the prophecy about David. Throughout this time, David remained faithful to God and refrained from taking vengeance on Saul, even when given the opportunity. This teaches us humility, loyalty, and the ability to wait for God's timing. In life, we often grow impatient, especially when we see others achieving success. You might be working hard and praying daily, yet results seem distant. David's story reminds us that God's timing is not our timing. He is refining you, preparing you for something greater. Ask yourself, are you willing, like David, to wait with faith and patience, even when you feel forgotten? Can you maintain your trust in God, even when circumstances seem against you? The trials you face today are God's way of preparing you for a future beyond your imagination. Just as David rose from a shepherd to a king, you too can rise from your current situation to achieve greatness if you place your trust in God. Here is an important reminder. God does not call the qualified, He qualifies the called. Keep walking, even if the road ahead seems unclear, for God is leading you to a place He has already prepared. Trusting God's purpose, discovering the bigger plan. One of the greatest challenges we face in life is the feeling of not knowing our purpose. When things don't go according to plan, when dreams seem shattered, it's easy to wonder, where is God in all of this? The story of Joseph in the Bible is a powerful reminder that even when life seems unfair, God is always working for a purpose greater than we can foresee. Joseph, sold into slavery by his own brothers, had every reason to feel hopeless and bitter. From being a beloved son, he became a slave and later was falsely accused and imprisoned. Yet, through every trial, Joseph kept his faith in God. He didn't let his circumstances define him. Instead, he lived with integrity, worked diligently, and trusted God's plan. In the end, God raised Joseph to a position of power in Egypt, where he saved his family and countless others during a famine. Joseph's famous words to his brothers in Genesis 50 verse 20 stand as a testament to God's transformative power. "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." The lesson here is that we cannot always see the full picture God is painting. The trials you are facing today may be the very stepping stones God is using to prepare you for the purpose He has ordained for you. In the midst of suffering, remember that God has not abandoned you. He is shaping you, refining you, so that you can face greater responsibilities in the future. Ask yourself, can you trust God in the difficult moments? Or are you allowing bitterness and disappointment to take root? It is crucial to understand that even when life feels unfair, God is working for your good. He never forgets you, and His purposes are always good. This truth aligns with a profound life philosophy. Live with the faith that no matter how difficult today may be, God is leading you to a better place. The challenges you endure are not in vain. They are part of the journey that molds you into a stronger, more steadfast individual, ready to fulfill the mission God has for you. Let Joseph's story remind you that, in all circumstances, whether good or bad, God is at work. Trust that He has a greater plan for you, and keep walking forward with faith and hope. In closing, I want to remind you that in your darkest moments, when you feel like giving up, turn to God. Never think you are too small or too flawed for Him to use you. Just like Samuel, David, or Joseph, you, too, can be an instrument of God's extraordinary work. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and He will make your paths straight. Proverbs 3 verses 5 to 6. Hold on to your faith, and God will never let you down. If you feel inspired by today's message, share this video with your loved ones. Together, let us spread the message of hope and God's love.